Mario Alejandro is one of the original hobby bloggers. From 2008 to 2010, his site Wax Heaven was one of the most trafficked hobby-related websites that were out there. Now he's very active on Twitter, continues to be a great source of hobby news and opinions. So welcome, Mario. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And I just want to say right off the bat that I like to give credit on everything I do. And I will say that there were three other bloggers that I know of before I got my start. That would be Stale Gum, Cardboard Junkie, and the Baseball Card Blog by Ben Henry. So I was number four. As far as I know.
That is pretty early. Like I said, there was that period of time where hobby blogs just took off, and that was kind of all the rage. It was kind of a first opportunity we had for independent fans of the hobby and collectors to be able to catalog and capture and share information about the collections that they've been building and the other things that were going on in the hobby. And I think the era of hobby blogging really did a lot to help bring the hobby to where it is today and to set things up for furthering the education that collectors have and the type of information that's available to collectors. So thank you for your early contributions.
Before that, I mean, the only other place you could go were like message boards. There was Freedom Cardboard, and then Beckett had a message board because, social media wasn't the way it is now. And like Facebook, I think when I started Facebook, you still had to be in like a university to even be allowed on Facebook. So really it was message boards and nothing really else. And then a lot of people had problems with like moderators and stuff. So having the opportunity to kind of create your own little space, it grew so quickly. I was shocked by it. I think at one point there was like 7 blogs, and then all of a sudden there were over 200 active bloggers. It was unbelievable.
Why did you start writing about cards?
Well, I originally I got my first pack of cards by accident in 1990, and I just became a collector. I just opened a pack of 1990 Topps Ames. I was a wrestling kid. I was an Ultimate Warrior fan, and I was a Transformers kid. And I went to Ames, which is no longer in business. They were like a smaller Walmart. And I went with my mom, and I looked at the Transformers. They didn't have anything I wanted. I looked for the wrestling cards, which were produced by Classic. They're beautiful cards, and they didn't have any. So I was, walking to the cash register with my mom, feeling depressed that I couldn't find anything I wanted. And I saw a pack of cards, which I thought were playing cards. So I begged my mom to buy me playing cards, even though I had no use for it. But she said, okay, no problem. So I got in the car and I opened up the cards, and they were baseball cards. And, I'm from Venezuela, so I'd only been there in America 2 years. I didn't even know what baseball was. I didn't know who these guys were. I just, was flipping through the cards, and it was like all these old guys that had no appeal to me, like a Ricky Henderson, Cal Ripken, Don Mattingly. To me, these guys were ancient. And then one card peeked out. It was this young slugger. If you look at his 1990 Topps Ames card, he looks like a wrestler. He looks like a WWF wrestler. He had these gigantic arms, muscles. He had a look on his face like he was trying to murder. I didn't know what he was doing. He just had a bat in his hand. I don't know what he was doing. I didn't know the sport, but just the look of him. And his last name was similar to mine, Canseco. It just grabbed my attention right away. So, that's how I became a collector during the junk wax era. Everybody in my neighborhood had baseball cards, even if they weren't collectors. Their parents would buy them sets, and they'll say, we'll just put these away, for your college tuition and crazy things like that. Or, even kids that had no interest in it had baseball cards. So I would go to each one of my friends, and I would look through their collection of cards and find a Canseco in there till I had like 10 or 12, and I collected till like 98 or 99. And then, I had a job and a girlfriend and a car to maintain. And I kind of put the baseball cards on the back burner. But in 2007, I just happened to Google baseball cards one day. I was at the hospital, and I was stuck in the lobby, and I had my Sony PSP, which you could use for internet, and I Googled baseball cards, and the baseball card blog by Ben Henry came up, and he was the most talented writer ever. And I swear I spent like 6 hours on that website reading up on baseball cards, modern and past sets, and that was kind of what brought me back to collecting. And then within 3 or 4 months after I started collecting again, I wanted to kind of showcase my Jose Canseco collection, which, that's kind of how the site started. But then I realized nobody really cares about Jose Canseco. So I started writing about the hobby and current products. And that's when everything took off.
Did you have a background in writing?
None. Actually, my background, actually, really, the Wax Heaven, it blew up because it was like I don't know if you remember a guy named Perez Hilton. He was
Mhm.
a big celebrity blogger back then, and it was bad grammar, but it was just so active that it exploded. And I look back at some of my articles from 2007 to 2009, and I cringe because it's full of bad grammar, it's full of misspelled words. It's just a disaster. But people picked up on my enthusiasm for collecting, that it didn't really matter. These days, my writing has gotten a lot better, a lot more professional. I have some stuff in the works, which, once it goes through, I think people are going to be shocked. But I have absolutely no writing experience at all. I just wanted to write about something I loved, and it worked out.
What do you think it was that allowed you to build such a reputation and a following to be able to become one of the most trafficked blogs that was out there? Was it that passion, or was it the frequency and
It
the
was the
velocity of
frequency.
what you were putting out there? What do you think it was?
So in 2008, the economy crashed. I don't know if you know much about that, but I was working. I had this great job, and one day I showed up to work, and the doors were locked, and the entire building was empty. So overnight, they moved out, and everybody lost their job. And I was living with a girl named Tatiana. I had already started the blog, and she said to me, "You've worked so hard the last couple of years." She was doing really well. She was working at a printing company, and then she did side work as a photographer, as a wedding photographer. So she said to me, "You've been working so hard the last couple of years. Why don't you take some time off?" And I said, "Well, okay, absolutely, I'd love to do that." And I stayed at home, and yeah, blogging kind of became my job. So it was frequency, it was the news. I got in with certain companies, and they were feeding me stories. I had Upper Deck feeding me negative stories about tops. I had companies calling me, "Hey, can you talk about this and this and that?" And I had companies providing products. And one thing I was doing that I could separate myself from those 200 other blogs is I was writing detailed product reviews, because I was basically getting every single product that was released. So I could write reviews, I could scan the cards, I could do videos, and then I would do giveaways, and all for each and every single product that I had. But I think it was the fact that I was the most active. Somebody told me on Twitter the other day, they were there for the glory days of Wax 7, and he said he would leave on his at his job. He would leave my page up on his home screen, and he would just refresh it throughout the day. And every time he would refresh it, there was a new story. So that's kind of why Twitter has worked out, because I have a job where I have a little bit of freedom. So I can, in between things that I'm doing, because I'm on the road, I can just pull over and start reading some articles, or get some kind of inspiration to write. And it's kind of been a little bit like Wax Heaven was.
And how long did you write for Wax Heaven, or how long did you have that up until about
It,
2010 or so?
Yes, it was around 2009. It was 2.5 years. I ended up, uh, me and that girlfriend, we ended up splitting up, and it was because of baseball cards. That's the real reason why. I was more into baseball cards than I was into that relationship, and the more I got into it, the bigger the site got, the more the demands were. I would get 100 emails a day. I'm not even exaggerating. I would get just product after product with just I had like 20 boxes of product that I needed to work on. I had cards to scan, to put away. I was giving away cards locally in my town. There was just so much to do that I wasn't getting paid for. But I mean, I had made that deal where she told me just stay home for a while, take a year off. So I was neglecting her. I was neglecting her. I was more into the, you know, I guess I was before the term existed. I was kind of a social media influencer, and so I chose baseball cards over her, and we ended up splitting up. And you know what happens when you split up and you haven't worked for a year? You have no money.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to move back home with my mom at 27 and start over. And I'm thankful. I'm disappointed in closing the site, but I couldn't concentrate on baseball cards for a while. I had to kind of get my stuff together, get a job, and save some money. And I'm thankful that we split up because she wasn't the one for me. And I met, the woman that would eventually be the mother of my daughter. So it worked out well. But at the time, yeah, I'm disappointed because I don't like to make the hobby a business for me. I want it to always be a hobby, but I could have cashed out. And with the site as big, I was getting more traffic than the Beckett.com. I was getting just as much traffic as Freedom Cardboard, and Freedom Cardboard is a message board that gets refreshed consistently. So it was so to the point where I could have made I had an opportunity to invest in Cardboard Connection, and all he wanted was $700, and I would have been in. And there were so many opportunities that I missed out on, and so I stopped blogging. I shut down the site. I ended up selling it for like $1,200. And then some guy took over, and he used the domain name and all that, and the audience, and it didn't really work out for him. And I think in 2017, I was able to get it back from him, the archives and everything else.
Now, you've never shied away from strong opinions. And, you had shared when you first got started, you were starting with information about your Conseco collection. Then you started doing product reviews and those types of things as well. How did how did the type of content you are writing about evolve over time? And how do you see
Yeah.
that the topics and themes playing from when you were getting started to what you share today on Twitter?
Well, what I was doing, I was writing a post today about a certain Jose Canseco card that I had in my collection. And at the same time, I was buying every single Topps product that was out there. This is before I was sponsored. So I'd buy, Topps cosigners, I'd buy Topps Finest, I buy Topps Flag, every single Topps product. And before I knew it, and I was buying for the fun aspect of it, not because I was trying to sell it. But, I was also making trades, and I realized, hold on a sec, I have 6 different autographs of Michael Bourne, who was on the Philadelphia Phillies. The cards were absolutely worthless. I couldn't give them away to a Phillies fan if I wanted to. And so, my Conseco posts were getting like 10 to 15 views per day. So one day I said, I'm going to write about this Michael Bourne situation. Why am I getting so many Michael Bourne cards? And so I did that with, I wasn't cursing or anything, but I said something to the effect of, I am sick of getting Michael Bourne cards. And I explained why. And that I went from 10 to 15 views to like 200. And then I thought, well, a light bulb went off in my head. I said, well, maybe I should, I don't think people care about my Jose Canseco collection. This is before Tan Man, started buying up all these amazing pieces. I was just getting just whatever I could afford. But yeah, I just noticed that people wanted to hear opinions about current products, not 1991 tops.
And then that's when you started to adapt a little bit. How did that continue to evolve? Once you were writing until 2010, you said you took another break, you came back on Twitter at the time, and were, starting to again discuss the hobby. How did that kind of continue to evolve over time? kind of what you
Well,
were talking about, your approach to creating and that type of thing.
well, when I came back originally was 2014. I created what I called Wax Morgue, which was kind of a blog about celebrities passing away and what cards were available of these celebrities. And I didn't make it. It didn't really take off. In 2018, I came on Twitter. I had always avoided Twitter, actually all social media really, but I came on Twitter and I thought, everybody's going to remember me from Wax 7. I'm going to be this big, huge influencer again. And I came on Twitter and nobody knew who I was. There's this cycle of collectors that come and go. So a lot of these collectors that were big during the Wax 7 days were gone. They were not collecting anymore. They moved on to other things, and so I kind of started from zero. And I began talking about the hobby, but around that time I started to get very bitter. I think Tan Man was one of the reasons because he had he had reached this level just talking about Canseco that I was never able to do. And not only that, he had so much influence on the market, the Jose Canseco market, that suddenly cards that I was picking up for $20 were $70, $80, $90. He single-handedly absolutely crushed the Jose Canseco market to where it's at now. It's coming back down to earth now, but for a while, he resurrected the Jose Canseco market, the collectors that were in love with him in the 80s and 90s. And there was some bitterness in my I think I've talked to Tanner a few times since then, but I had a lot of bitter feelings. I had a lot of toxic type tweets against Ivan from Watch the Breaks. We had a falling out. It just nothing was really working out, and I ended up getting suspended. I came back a second time, and it was just I was dead in the water right off the bat. And then the third time I came back, which is now, I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to focus on what, Superfractor, Bat Barrel, 101 that Tanner's getting. I'm just going to focus on what I love, which is baseball cards, rare baseball cards, 90s baseball cards, inserts, Pinnacle brands. I'm just going to focus on what I want to talk about that makes me happy as a collector. And I'm not going to worry about the rest. And in if people want to like what I do, they can, follow and like. If they don't, it's okay. I'm just going to do what I do, which is write about baseball cards. And yeah, it just started taking off a lot quicker than I ever expected.
During that period of time a few years ago, you had mentioned, when you kind of first came back, you you look back at that now and think to yourself, maybe you were sharing some things or looking at things from a mindset that was a little bit toxic. Was that would you say that that was limited to kind of your hobby mindset, or do you feel like you maybe were having similar mindset issues outside in your personal life as well? I always sometimes wonder for myself,
Of
is
course.
is my hobby mindset influencing my personal life, or are things in my personal life impacting my hobby mindset and the things that I share there? Any thoughts? Have you thought about that
Of
at all? If that's
course.
something that's come up.
I would say 2018 to 2019 were actually some of my better years. I was almost I had almost become a bodybuilder at that point. I was, I followed in my hero's footsteps and began using steroids, testosterone, and all these different products. So from a personal standpoint, I felt like a kid again. I was, in my 30s at that point, and I had a beautiful girlfriend. I had my daughter. I had, my life was great, but I think the toxicity originated from the fact that I came back to the hobby, and I had this expectation that I was going to be viewed as something special, when the truth is, I'd been gone for 7 8 years. I don't know how long it'd been at that point, and you can't expect somebody to even care. You got to rebuild that audience. And so I think it came from that. It came from, watching, Ivan watch the breaks, get 50,000 followers, and Tan Man doing some amazing, amazing work as a writer and as a card designer. And I felt envious, I guess. And I think that's where my toxicity came from. And my personal life was great at that time. So it never, it was just the hobby. I think I needed a break, and that's why I took a 3 year collecting break. I stopped collecting completely.
Yeah, so that's I think that's cool that you had a chance to reflect on that and realize that maybe there was that personal envious nature of the recognition that some others were getting, um, and how you took steps to then adjust from that and come back again. You mentioned that you've talked to Tan Man to Tanner a few times, since then. Have you had a chance to kind of reach out to Ivan and kind of, I don't know if reconcile's the right word, but to have a conversation with Ivan as well?
Well, actually, there was a few people on my list. Ivan was the first one. And we did make up, and now we follow each other, and he retweets my stuff, and we're good. Which is great because I think that I harassed him possibly the most of anybody that he just, something about him at that time just got under my nerve, and we did make up. The other person I reached out to was Susan. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. She didn't accept my apology. Another person I reached out to who recently passed away was Ben. um
Cardboard
you know who
icons.
I'm talking. Yes. So Cardboard Icons created his blog because of Wax Heaven. He was such a fan. He even told me, and he talks about it. It was his inspiration for creating Cardboard Icons. And at my most toxic, he unfollowed me. And I was like, it kind of hurt a little bit. And I
Mhm.
never talked to him about it. But when I came back, he was like the third person that I apologized to, and we made up as well. And the last podcast I did was like 2 months ago with David Adams. And I was terribly nervous because it was a live
Mhm.
podcast, and he was the very first person to reach out and tell me, "Hey, man, you did freaking great. You sounded great. You didn't sound nervous. I'm proud of you." So I every single person I've reached out to apologize for my behavior in the past accepted it, except for one, which I understand. Not, my behavior, or the way that I was behaving at the time, you don't have to accept my apology. If I offended you, or if I was rude in any way, it's something that I can't take back. I can only try to do better.
In today's internet world, when someone has a large following, they get labeled as being an influencer. And you mentioned kind of early on with the following that you were building, you might have been an influencer before we called things an influencer. But you've also been pretty adamant recently that you don't currently see yourself as an influencer. You see yourself as a collector. Why is that so important? Why is that distinction so important to you right now?
I believe that, and one of my biggest issues with Ivan back then, I, was constantly referring to him as a shill, a product shill. And that's always been something that I've wanted to shy away from. I don't want I don't want that label. I don't want people to think you could buy me off. And when during the Wax Heaven days, when I was sponsored by Tops and Upper Deck, and I received every single product that they had of every sport. Even like I would open a football on camera. I didn't even know how to pronounce these names, but I did it. Um, both of them told me, you are 100% free to give your honest opinion on our products. And so I felt, with that web show that Ivan had at the time with that other guy, I can't remember what was it called.
Go GTS Live?
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, I felt that that played off more like an infomercial. And I told Ivan before we had our falling out that you are so talented. You are such a dynamic personality. I wish that you could incorporate that more than, having a Tracy Hackler on there promoting his wares when we know that Panini is screwing collectors left and right. And that was one of my biggest gripes with Ivan. And I've learned to accept it, because even now I have a couple of deals on the table that pay me money or credit or things like that. And it's I just try to separate the collecting because I don't do this for money. um, I do this as a hobby. I have a full-time job. I'm not going to quit my job to become to start selling cards at shows or producing, a podcast or anything. I mean, I tried the podcast, but I'm not somebody that I can't really talk. I'm more of a writer. How some people, they say they have a face made for radio. Well, I have a voice that's made for writing, you know. So I don't I'm not out here to make money or to make money or to become a one of these guys like Ben Ball or Gary Vee or somebody that's going to just get paid for the hobby. I want to make sure people know I'm a collector all the way through.
I've also seen you refer to yourself as a hobby historian. And I kind of feel that having a perspective and being educated on the history of our hobby is super important. Why do you enjoy serving in that role of a hobby historian?
Well, and people throw that in my face sometimes because the self-appointed hobby historian. The way I look at it is, I have knowledge from 1990 to 2023 because I've been a part of the hobby. Even on my time that I was away or times that I've been away, I've always kept up. And for me, like when I was going through that breakup, back during the Wax 7 days, I had a lot of time to myself to reflect. And I even went out and bought a Beckett almanac, and I was literally reading page by page, highlighting certain items because I knew that at some point I was going to write about it. And so I've been studying, I've been collecting, I've been talking, I've been literally. I even scour message boards, active ones that have shut down years ago that are still available in the archives. I like to have this knowledge for me so I can write and produce content that maybe I could write about something that even some of the biggest spenders in the hobby that have been collecting for years haven't heard about, and that's kind of those kind of comments always motivate me to keep looking and finding stuff to write about.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of where we're at in the hobby today. There's good things going on in the hobby today. There's maybe some potentially concerning things going on in the hobby today. I thought maybe we could spend a little bit of time just talking a little bit about kind of our perspectives on today's hobby. So, first of all, what are some things that you're excited about when you think about the hobby in its current iteration?
I believe that the printing technology looks better than it's ever been. I look at some of these refractors. I don't collect them because Jose Canseco's not in it. So I really only collect Jose Canseco for the most part. And but some of the cards that I see are absolutely gorgeous. Tops, chrome, the cosmic chrome, the regular chrome refractors. There's just so much out there that is absolutely gorgeous. And it's the best cards I've seen in my entire life. Even some Panini stuff, even Panini, which I've always been anti non unlicensed cards, but even some of their stuff just looks fantastic.
And for me, I think one of the benefits is, we've had a rise and fall over these last couple of years, but I think overall we still have more collectors today than we had in 2018, 2019. And while there's still maybe some education that needs to happen with some of them to make sure that they fully appreciate where we've been and where we could be going, I think the fact that we've got more people collecting and more people in the hobby is also a positive.
Absolutely. And you got to remember in 2007 when I came back to the hobby, card shops were absolutely dead. and products were selling for $60. You could buy Bowman Chrome for $79. And sometimes I would buy things out of pity because I'm like, oh my god, this shop is going to close down if I don't buy that box of Topps Turkey Red. That's not how it is today. That's not how it is today. Everything sells out. The remaining card shops are, you know, trying to survive getting 3 or 4 boxes of a product at a time. So I think that yeah, it's a lot better. I think unfortunately, it's gotten out of hand with the prices.
Well, yeah, you mentioned prices. What are some things, that maybe concern you a little bit for where we're at today?
I mean, $500-600 for a box of Chrome or Bowman, it's just it's unacceptable. And I understand, if you buy a box of 1991 Bowman back in the day, it was $30, and there was no card that was gonna, make you $10,000. There's always that opportunity with these products. You had the Drew Jones for $1 million, the Babe Ruth, whatever retro fractor. There's all these bounties and there's all these cards that you could sell potentially for $1,000 to $10,000 all day long. But for the most part, most people are not going to get those type of boxes. So investing or spending $500-600 on a box of cards for me personally is unacceptable. If you're a breaker and you have that kind of money, or if you're just you just have very deep pockets and it's no big deal to you, then go right ahead. For me, I'm a hardworking man. I have a spouse who works as well, and I could not justify, spending that kind of money on a box of cards, knowing, for example, $800, you can buy, a flat screen TV, 58 inches, 60 or whatever, 60 for, $300-400 that you're going to spend, 3 years on. So a box of cards for me, it's just it's a rich man's game, and that's unfortunate because it has pushed out a lot of collectors, collectors, set builders, guys that were just busting boxes because it was fun, because they enjoy it. But you cannot enjoy a product when you know that you just dropped $800, and you have to make some of that money back. Not because you want to pull something great, and because you're gonna need that money. Times are tough right now, and I don't expect Bowman Chrome to be $200 next year like it was 15-20 years ago. But it has pushed out a lot of people. I've talked to many people that just can't afford to do it. And even if you can't afford it, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. I tell people, just go out. If a box is $500, get a couple $100, buy one of the big autographs in the product, even a parallel of it. You're going to be much happier in the long run.
What's your perspective on this era of exclusive licenses that we find ourselves in? Way back when there was an exclusive license for Topps, and then we had the 80s and 90s where we had multiple manufacturers in every sport. That was kind of you and I's collecting sweet spot, right? When we had Topps, Donruss, Fleer, Upper Deck, Pinnacle, Score, Pacific. We had all kinds of different companies producing cards, and that was great for us as collectors because we had so much variety. They were forced to compete against each other. It turned out to be not so great for the companies themselves. Now we're in this world where we've got exclusive licenses for pretty much every sport and entertainment, topic that's out there. And we're in a new world of exclusive licenses and narrowing down even to an exclusive manufacturer for most things. What's your perspective on where we see ourselves in the licensing world?
Well, in 2009, when Topps became exclusive to MLB, I was celebrating just like everyone else because I loved refractors. I loved what Topps was doing, and Upper Deck was kind of slipping. They in 2007 they had the sweet spots with the faded autographs right out the box. They were going at Barry Bonds and going at Topps, and I thought, you know what? Maybe this is what we need. We just let's forget all about Upper Deck. They've had their run. I was 100% in support of what Tops was planning on doing. And then I just started to see a lot of things. One of the biggest things that I saw right off the bat was the image recycling. So, there are photographs of Jose Canseco that have been recycled year after year after year since 2014. There are there, there seems to be a few products that get this wonderful innovative designs, but everything else is just, I feel like they're asleep at the wheel at this point. And competition would be great, but it's not going to come from Panini or Leaf. So it may be something that, maybe when we're older we'll get it again. um Back in 1997, those were the great years. We had all these companies competing for our business, but at the same time, there was too much product out there. So if we could, in a perfect world, we would get like five products from each company, Panini, Leaf, and Tops. But I don't think that's feasible anymore. I don't think that would be affordable. I'm sure paying for these licenses is into the millions, so they just have to constantly produce and produce just to break even. So I think, unfortunately, I don't see a change from the Fanatics monopoly. If anything, it's probably going to get worse.
What other topics are on your mind? What other things have you been thinking about that you maybe wanted to make sure we hit on today?
Well, I think that what's going on right now for the people that follow me on Twitter is this. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. This kid, Buddy, who is in hospice care. He's fighting cancer. He's been fighting two different forms of cancer. And, I've worked in the death care industry for 19 years. So I know what happens, unfortunately, when you've reached hospice. It's end of life care. So his family has asked collectors, no, not collectors, they've asked anybody who has some time and the resources to send Buddy a Christmas card. And his birthday is also on December 12th. And so I've been kind of pushing that. I've actually had a meeting with Fanatics yesterday with the CEO of Fanatics Collectibles. I've been in touch with Michael Rubin. They're planning some great things for this kid, Buddy. And if you follow me on Twitter, absolutely check that out. It is my pinned tweet. All they're really asking for is a Christmas card, and I sent a Christmas card, and I just told my followers, if you send them a Christmas card, just throw in a baseball card in there, because an 11-year-old kid, he's gonna love to see something shiny, something from Topps Chrome or something. And we've had some good results, and I know that Tops and Fanatics, even though they are the evil monopoly that people say they are, Michael Rubin got on the phone in a heartbeat to work something out. So I have to give them some respect. I've been hitting them very hard. I've been hitting them very hard almost all year long, because there have been quality control issues. There have been some shenanigans happening, and I've been one of their biggest critics. And Michael basically said, I understand where you're coming from, and you know what? I really enjoy the work that you're doing, and I want you to help me, do better in the future with our products. So I have to, you know, give him some props there. He definitely, it could just be, what he's saying, but I do feel that, they're trying their absolute best. And I think that 2024 will probably be a lot less drama free, or more
Yeah.
drama free, excuse me.
Yeah, that would be great. We've definitely had some drama. Like you said, it's a sometimes a tough line to walk when we want to celebrate the good things going on in the hobby, but at the same time, we can't completely ignore those areas of improvement or those things that need that need work, right? For the better of the hobby as a whole and for the betterment of collecting as a whole. And sometimes that can be a fine line to walk. And you don't want to dwell on some of those negative things, or you don't want to necessarily dwell on some of the hobby personalities that may not be as good for the hobby as others. But at the same time, we also want to celebrate the good things that are happening. It can be a tough line to walk.
It's very tough, because I do like to report on things happening in the hobby, and this year it's been a lot of top stuff. I mean, it's you cannot ignore what's happened with Topps products. And for me, if you're going to sell me a $300 $400 box of cards, I don't expect a return on my investment of 50, 60, 70. But the cards have to be, well centered. They can't be damaged. They can't be missing hits. Things like that are so important because there are new collectors, and that first box of cards that they invest their paycheck into, if it's not, the what was promised, it could very well be their last box of cards. So for, back in the 80s and 90s, yeah, 20 $40, for a box of cards. But when it's, six, seven, $800 or more, you have to do better, for your customers. And yeah, it is hard. Like I said, listen, I constantly run into people on Twitter who I've never even spoken to who have me blocked all the time. I'll see messages and I'll click on that person's profile because they said something interesting and I'm blocked, and it's happened to some really big accounts, because what I report on, it hurts their business. If they're a breaker, if they're selling cards, if they're going to shows, if my tweet about, Topps is missing hit gets 300 400 likes, a lot of people are going to see it. And I don't know if they feel threatened by it or they just don't, they want to stick their head in the sand. I feel like it's important to report on the good just as much as the bad. So, for me, it's really hard because when I like a Topps product, they'll say, "Oh, I guess Topps is paying you to say that." And then when I say, "Oh, this and that," I'm not speaking as positively, they'll say, "Oh, you hate Topps because you lost your sponsorship deal." And it's like, well, either I'm one or the other. You cannot complete. I believe I'm right down the middle, with the exception of like Leaf. I think Leaf does a lot of bad stuff, and I don't like a lot of their products. But with the exception of Leaf, I try to be. I basically serve up the story, and then I let the followers, the people on Twitter, I let them comment on it. I don't personally say, "Hey, this product sucks," or "If you buy this, you're going to be ripped off." I just put it out there, and whatever people choose to comment is how they feel. It shouldn't, affect me. But I was recently unfollowed by David Adams. I just did their podcast, like a month and a half ago, and everything was great. And what I did is I quote tweeted their most recent bounty for 100,000 or 200, whatever it was for. And the comment section was really nasty. And I literally asked a bunch of people, "Was this negative in any way?" And nobody said it was negative. It was just the people were not happy about the bounty or not happy about whatever it was. So, like I said, I get unfollowed, I get blocked constantly. And it's just, people, hopefully some people appreciate what I do, which is I shine a light on the good and I shine a light on the bad. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Very cool. Well, hey, I really appreciate you spending a few minutes today, chatting about your background in the hobby, the content that you're creating, the messages that you're trying to send. I think that is, I really appreciate you spending that time because I think it's important information for people to see. And if people aren't following you already, they can learn a lot by following what you're doing on Twitter.
I appreciate your time as well. Thank you.